Good afternoon, Howard. Thank you for being here. Today is April the 3rd, 2012. We're interviewing Howard Reed, who was born on September the 2nd, 1925. He served in the Army Air Force during the Second World War. He is being interviewed by myself, Bob Shook, and Fred Wackler, and Lloyd Perry. This interview is taking place at Post 43 in Troy, Ohio. The Post 43 is a sponsor of the Miami County Veterans History Project. Howard, I'd like for you to start right from the beginning now and talk about your family background and how you transitioned into the military and your first experiences, and then right on down through your whole career in the military, and then when you got back home. So you're on, Howard.
Thank you. My father's name was also Howard. That's the reason I have the J, because I was junior. That's kind of strange, because when I was born at home. The doctor came in and said to my mother, what is your boy's name? She said Howard Jr. So that's the way my birth certificate is written. Instead of Howard Reed Jr., it's Howard Jr. So in the neighborhood where I lived at one time, there were 5 of us who were called juniors. Our mothers would call Junior. So 5 of us would go home, say, did you call? So mother'd say no. So the boys got together and we all came up with new nicknames. And so ever since then, I've been known as Howdy. So that's part of the background. I was born here in Troy, and then when I was 12, my father got a job in Piqua, so we moved as a family to Piqua. And it seems strange, but I played football, basketball, and baseball for Piqua High School, played against all the kids that I grew up with here in Troy, and you'd make a tackle on the football field, they'd say, nice tackle, Howdy, or whatever, and that was really good to be able to compete against these guys that I grew up with. I have 2 sisters, both older than I. Of course, they're both deceased now, but they both were in the service also. They were both in the waves. And then when they had this flight, my older sister died fairly young. My younger sister asked her if she wanted to go to the memorial, take that flight to Washington, D.C. to see the memorials. So she and I went together as a team, brother and sister. I think at that time we were the only brother and sister team that had made that flight.
And when was that, Howard?
Beg your pardon?
When was that?
That was in, maybe 3 years ago. I just can't remember exactly when that was. So that's pretty much my background as far as living here and then moving to Piqua. A group of us in the senior class decided we were going to enlist in the Air Force so that we could get our choice of service that we wanted to get into. And we all went down to Wright Pat and took the test for cadet training. And so as we went through, the government said they went down about every 10th person and would say, well, you made it, and the other 9 were washed out. I was one of them that was washed out. So that was a disappointment at that time. Went to basic training at the hellhole of the United States, Jefferson Barracks. That was what Walter Winchell called it. And it was pretty much exactly as he said. We were out on a hike with about 20 degree below temperature. One person froze to death, and he decided they decided then that it was too cold to be out on bivouac, so they
And where
brought
was
us
this,
in.
Howard?
This was in Jefferson Barracks, Missouri, and so they decided it was too cold, so brought us back. I finished my training there, and since they had washed me out of cadets, they didn't know what to do with me exactly. They found out that I was interested in medicine. I was planning on going to school after I got out of service, and so they put me into the medical section of the Air Force and sent me to Boise, Idaho, where I was working in the heart ward there. They posted a bulletin that said all former cadets could go to gunnery school if they wished. So right away I signed up to go to gunnery school because I wanted to get into the flying end of it. So I went to Las Vegas for 6 weeks of gunnery training, and I might say that the very first plane ride that I took on a B-17 was with a former pilot who had been a B-25 pilot, and he said, "I'll give you boys a good ride today." Well, I was up in the nose, which was nothing but plexiglass, and at the end of the runway was a hill, and I kept seeing this hill come closer and closer, and I kept saying, "Get it up, get it up." So we got to the hill, and up over the top of the hill we went, about 3 feet off the ground. So that was quite a thrill for the first ride.
Howard, before you go on, go back and talk about, you said cadet school. Would you explain that? I don't think we know.
Well, this was for pilot or navigation or bombardier training, and you would be sent to college and for that training. But as I say, the government washed you out simply for the convenience of the government, was what I was told. So that's the reason that I didn't make it. In gunnery
So you enlisted in cadet school, though?
Well, I enlisted in the Air Force, and then because of that, I was able to qualify for cadet according to test scores.
Okay.
So that was how I was able to get there, and that's that far. I remember one of the eye tests that they gave you, and that was to figure the depth perception, and a lot of guys couldn't make that. You had only about 10% deviation, and I was able to do that. I asked the fellow giving the test if anybody had ever done it correctly, completely. He said yes, he had one fellow of all of them that he tested, and he was doing it. He said, "I thought it was a mistake." He said he did it 10 times straight. So he said, "I knew it was actual that he was able to do this." So his eyes were really good. In gunnery school, we would shoot from both air and ground. We would, in one instance where we were shooting skeet from a moving truck, and you had to pull the birds as part of your training. You would shoot so many rounds and then go in and shoot and pull the traps for the birds. And they told you never to come out of that shed unless you put up a red flag because you're liable to get shot. Well, we had just changed from positions, and all of a sudden we're down on the south end of the area, and the door burst open. The guy came out waving his arm, "Don't shoot, don't shoot." And so we stopped the truck and said, "Well, why didn't you put up the red flag?" He says, "There's a rattlesnake in there." He says, "I wasn't going to take a chance on it." So that's the reason he came out of there in such a hurry. They woke the rattlesnake up, I guess, when they changed. So he'd rather get shot than get bit by a rattlesnake. So anyhow, I finished that. And then they sent me into flight training to Rapid City, South Dakota. And there you met the rest of your crew and became a crew to get ready to go overseas. I played, as I say once before, basketball and baseball, and we would go over to the gym at night. I and a couple other fellas, and we'd play the base team and we beat them. So the PT instructor wanted us to stay and play basketball for him at that time. And so I asked the crew members how they felt about it. They said they would rather I would go along. So that's the reason that I ended up going overseas. Went from Rapid City to Boston, where I got onto the Ile-de-France, which at that time was the largest boat that France had. And we left Boston. Only took us 9 days to travel the Atlantic, because every 9 or 10 minutes we had to change course so the submarines couldn't get lined up on us. So that was quite a trip, going that many days. During the flights in both the gunnery school and the crew training, we flew over mountains, and you would drop a lot of times 100 feet straight down. The bottom would drop right out of you, and the top of the plane would hit you on the head and knock you back to the ground. So I wasn't seasick because I was used to this motion that you got, so was fortunate in that sense. Landed up in Scotland and was there for a day or two, and then they shipped us to Snetterton Heath, which is the home of my 96 bomb group. This is the Snetterton Falcons book that the group put out later on with all of the information on it. So Snetterton Heath, and that's just a field that they made an airfield out of. Then from there we took a couple days of training and then went into combat. And first combat mission was somewhere in France. They got a pocket of Germans and couldn't get them out, so they would send in the Air Force to support the ground troops. I think I need to go back and tell you about something that happened in the crew training that was rather interesting and unique. It was my job to go into the bomb bays and pull the pins to arm the bombs. So the bombardier told me to go into the bomb bays and we were on a bombing mission or a trial run or whatever, and I was in the bomb bays, and you had to straddle. You only had about half an inch on either side to step your feet and straddle.
What kind of planes were these now?
These were B-17 bombers. And while I was in there, he opened the bomb bay doors. There was a rush of air hit me in the face, and I didn't know what was happening at first. Once that first rush of air came in, I understood that he was opening the bomb bays, and so there they were, open, and there was nothing between me and the ground below except just solid air. So that was quite a thrilling experience.
When you pulled a pin on a bomb, explain that a little bit. What do you mean?
Well, all the bombs have a hole drilled in the activator or timer or whatever, and it's like a cotter pin, and it just sinks straight through. You just pull that cotter pin back out, and that arms the bomb. Now, if they tried to take that little section out, only a quarter of a turn would set it off. A quarter of a turn back would set it off. So it was pretty dangerous to mess with it, especially on the ground or whatever. Now, the bombs were set so that altitude would be one of the factors, on the ground or delayed action. Those were the three things that they usually set. If it was above the ground, it would be like second story or third story or something like that. And if on contact with the ground would be another way they would explode, or they would be set so that it wouldn't explode for maybe 24 hours 15 hours, whatever, so that they were never safe, not knowing that there was a bomb that was going to go off. So that's what that was.
How heavy were these bombs, Howard?
Well, in service, when we were bombing Germany, most of them were 500-pounders. We carried, the bomb load was 12 500-pounders, which is a pretty good load when you figure all the gas that they had to have. So my position on takeoff, again, because I was small, weight-wise then, was up in the nose. And every time I would be up looking back, and we were still on the ground, and my nose cone was out over the end of the runway, and we were still on the ground. So we get to every inch of the runway before it would be lifted off. And then, of course, there was always fog in England, so it was a dangerous time to be taking off.
Was there a reason they put you in the nose because they wanted to wait there, or what?
Yeah, weight, distribution of weight. The others were more chunky and heavy and so on, so they tried to equalize the weight for the takeoff.
Did those planes struggle to get into the air then, what you're saying?
Yes, they would really struggle. They, as I say, they used every inch of runway that they possibly could to get in. I don't know what the airspeed was at that time, but it was 145, 150 mile an hour.
The B-17 had, what, how many engines again?
Had 4 engines. It's called the Flying Fortress, and then we were always in competition with the B-24, which was also a 4-engine plane, and it's called the Flying Boxcar. So, but we were near B-17 other bases and other B-24 bases, and there was always a danger of colliding in the air if you weren't extremely careful. This is on takeoff, getting into formation. So
How many planes in a formation when they got up then?
usually each group would put up 36 planes. You had a 12 in high section, 12 in medium section, and 12 in a low section. And sometimes they would get intermingled and get below you, and you weren't able to drop your bombs, or if you would, you'd have wiped out a section of planes. So it had to be something that really was careful.
Well, when the plane took off then, and now you're in air, what were your duties then? What did you have to do?
Well, of course, my duty, as I say, was pulling the pins and then making sure that your guns fired. We had 50 caliber machine guns, and you would test fire them once you got out over the North Sea, Strait of Dover, or wherever you were going. And that brings up an incident that happened. I test fired the left, I was a right waist gunner, and I test fired the left waist guns, and it quit firing. So I tried to lift off the back plate of the gun to get to it to find out what was wrong, and I couldn't get the plate off. So I called the engineer. He came back with a big screwdriver, and we kept working, prying up on this back plate with this big screwdriver. And once we got it up, all of a sudden the spring flew out and hit across on the opposite side of the plane, put about a quarter-inch, half-inch dent in the plane. If anybody had been standing right behind it, it would have killed them just like an arrow would be going through the human body.
What size machine guns were these?
These were 50 caliber machine guns, which is pretty powerful, do a lot of damage. Once you get in the air, then you have to go on oxygen if you get up above 10,000 feet. And if you don't, you will pass out and eventually die. Also, the temperature becomes very cold. At 20,000 feet, most of the days that we flew, the temperature was 60 below zero. And you had a heated suit that you wore. You wore long underwear, usually, start out with, and then a wool uniform, then your heated suit, and then another wool sheer-lined coat, jacket, pants, boots, everything. And then, of course, you had your oxygen mask. So actually, the only thing that was exposed was your forehead. And a lot of times, if you wore goggles, that would cover your forehead so that you would avert frostbite.
Did you carry a parachute with you?
Your parachute, usually we wore a harness that would hook on, and you laid the parachute around somewhere where you knew it was, so that you grab it real quick and hook it onto the had two hooks up here, and you just snapped it on so that in case you needed it, it was there. So you didn't wear it, it was too cumbersome. You're supposed to wear a flak jacket, which weighed about 45 pounds, but most of us just threw the flak jacket in the plane and walked around beside it, and that was it.
Did you ever have to use your parachute?
No, thank goodness I didn't. That was a one thankful thing. Although I guess Munich was the worst city that we had bombed, because that was Hitler's Berchtesgaden, and he had many guns surrounding Munich. It was so bad that the Air Force flew 6 planes in with nothing but chaff, which is nothing more than tin foil that would float down and foul up the radar. Well, of those 6 planes that they flew in, none of them made it back. And the flak was still pretty bad. Now, flak is the shells that come up from the guns, the German guns, and explode, and it gets really dangerous because it will burst, and the little pieces of metal will tear anything, anybody, planes and so on, into shreds. Now, one of the planes that flew that chaff were the group, or the crew was in our barracks, and they had 2 barracks, 2 crews to a barracks, and they were one of them that didn't come back. I talked to them after the war, and they had a direct hit in the radio room, and it killed the radio operator instantly. They said he had 23 holes in him. One went right through his neck and killed him immediately. The ball turret gunner got hit in the foot. When he got hit, his head went forward, hit the gun sight, poked his eye out. He passed out. The waist gunner got hit up in the upper arm, and they were able to get the waist gunner, or the ball turret gunner, out, and they crash landed in Switzerland, so that instead of going into Germany, there was a section where they plane, as they were crash landing, the plane hit a little hill and swung them back into Switzerland rather than being prisoners of war for the Germans. So that was exciting for them. But Munich was a tough city to bomb because of all the guns that they had around there.
What size were those guns, you know?
They were 88s. I don't know. The gunners, the German gunners, were extremely accurate with them. I was told, and I don't know how much truth it was, that Hitler had 5,000 of them around Munich. Now, that to me seems an awful lot, but that was what I was told.
Tell me this now. How did they prepare you in case you were shot down?
Okay, well, they gave us an escape kit, and in that escape kit, they gave us these maps of Austria, Germany, Belgium, Holland, they're waterproof silk, and they gave us those. They gave us a file, a saw blade, and compasses. Now, I want you to see these compasses if you can. I'm not sure that you can see these. There's one.
Okay.
Now, they told us that if we got caught, to swallow it or throw it. That was one. Well, that's no problem because that's pill size. Here's the next size. Now, those two compasses were supposed to help you get out. Then I have an escape kit. Now, this is old. This is almost 70 years old. And as you can see, there's some chewing gum in there. I don't think it'd be fit to chew today, but nevertheless, that was there. They gave you milk chocolate in there, halogen tablets to purify the water. This became a canteen. You could take the top off of this, and became a canteen where you could hold and purify your water that you needed. There were some other things too, but basically that's what it was.
What were your instructions to do to try to get captured, or what?
If you were captured, give your name, rank, and serial number, and that was it, supposedly. Well, here's a picture that they took of me when I was graduated from gunnery school, and talked to these fellows that were captured, and they'd say name, rank, and serial, and they'd say, well, wait a minute, and the Germans would go over and come out a big book. Oh, is this you? Is your mother's name's this? They had everything that we had. They even had my picture, I'm sure, that was taken after I finished gunnery school. So,
About 3 minutes.
after the war, I signed up to go. We were supposed to go, the 96 was supposed to go for occupation in Germany. And I signed up to come home and go to retraining and go to Japan. 3 of us did that. And I got home on VJ Day. Can you imagine that? Now, it only took me 4 days to come home on the Queen Elizabeth. Took 9 to go over, but 4 to come home, because we could come in a straight line. So that was simpler, a lot simpler than, well, when I got home on VJ Day, that kind of took care of things. I didn't have enough points to get out, but I went to San Antonio, Texas.
Way further, you say points, now what do you mean by that?
Well, you accumulated points by number of months in service, overtime service, overseas service, excuse me. And so I didn't have enough points to get out, to get a discharge. So they sent me to San Antonio, Texas, and I got out December the 7th. Again, I got home on VJ Day, December the 7th, which was Pearl Harbor Day. So everything that happened to me seemed to have a connection to Japan, so rather than the European area. After I got out of service.
Before you go to that point, let's go back to in England. Talk about, did you lose any friends in your squadrons and so forth?
No, but the funny part of it was, I ran into a fellow from Troy who was in the barracks next door. His name was James Gillis. I didn't know him, but he found out I was from Piqua, and we talked some. And also then there was another fellow from Piqua that was in the same group. I can't remember his name right now, but nevertheless, those were the only 2 that I ran into.
Right now, you come back and now you're making a transition.
Yes. I got married while I was home on 30-day leave. I had gone with my girlfriend at that time. She went from sophomore in high school and went together and decided we'd get married while I was home. And she went along with me to San Antonio, Texas. I came back, and as I said earlier, I wanted to go to school. And fortunately, Uncle Sam paid my way through school. I graduated June 30th, 1950. My GI Bill ran out May the 31st, 1950. So it was 3 days beyond my GI Bill.
What school?
University of Dayton.
Okay.
I've also gone to Miami University, Rice State University, Central State University, Indiana State University. I have a master's degree. I taught school 16 years in junior high, and I was 15 years assistant principal, Pickle High School. I have 4 children, 2 sons, 2 boys. Both my wives, I've been married twice, and both of them are deceased now, so I'm a widower, but been a good life.
Well, looking back at your military career and all the experiences, anything that stuck out in your mind, anything that really, that you remember so much?
Well, I think that you make out of it what you put into it. That if you want to be a bad boy, you can be a bad boy. If you want to do as you're told, you can do that. And that's the way I looked at it, that to do as I was told. That was the way my parents always told me, to be good and to do as the right thing.
Is there anything else you'd like to add before we close up?
I can't think of anything right now.
Well, Howard, it's been an interesting listening to you this afternoon, and thank you for your service.
Well, thank you, and God bless America.
Thank you so much.